So everyone made it pretty clear on my first video that I am absolutely trash at mixing tracks. So I think I'm just gonna redo the entire video, like all the way. So for those of you who've already seen the first build for this, congratulations. You made it through, you heard all of the terrible audio that I mixed down, and now you get to see the new video where I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about what was actually happening, and you can hear it. The goal of this build was just to build a camper shell that I can put on the back of my truck and actually have a sleeping area that was over, the 5-foot bed. It's a 6-foot bed. I measured out some dimensions, and I started ripping down some shaped wood. I did this because I did not have enough wood to just use this and still have enough to do the top and the bottom. These pieces are going to be the lengthwise framey chunks that go on the top and the bottom of this build. Looking back on it, I wish I would have just, tried to find additional lumber for it, but working with what we have. After measuring out the pieces, I double checked to see that they fit and didn't look wonky stuffs. Next, I marked out where it was actually going to make contact with the different pieces. My plan was to notch this back portion, so it was going to sit across the two framey chunks on the bottom. I'm measuring stuff. Look at me measure. After I cut out those little notches, I lined up the boards just to make sure that they fit, and then I zipped them together with just screws, I think. Yeah, they're screws. I pre-drilled the holes and used Titebond 3 to make sure that the contact was hopefully going to hold up. I lost the footage of me cutting the support portions that go from the top to the bottom, or vice versa, or whatever. What I really ended up doing for this is I just ended up cutting, and then cutting wrong, and then cutting wrong, and doing it over and over again, and reattaching them and unattaching them over and over until I got angles that work properly. This method is not the best way of doing this. You could figure out a lot better ways to get proper angles, but it worked eventually. After I got it all connected, there were some flat spots, or the opposite of flat spots. There were some curved spots that I smoothed out so that it actually could fit in the bed and, kind of like lay flat against the bed of the truck. The test fit actually worked a lot better than I was expecting. It slid right in and it didn't seem like it was wobbling or bumping. I took the time to cut out a chunk of foam that was going to act as the ceiling. I figured that would be the best thing. That's what people use for a lot of these camper builds that don't use wood, so I actually did end up buying a little chunk. I threw it up on top of the frame and it fit pretty good. Next I just took a bunch of adhesive, plopped it back down, and found a bunch of different material that I could use to brace across the top of it with different clamps. I ended up eventually getting ratchet straps, and I think I took a chunk of an old piece of table and threw it across the top of it, and I just tried to cinch this down as much as I could. There's, as far as I'm aware, not a good way to like screw pieces of foam board like this, so the adhesive was pretty much the only thing I had to secure it. That was the only thing I could figure out how to use to secure it. Look at me go! Whee! I really didn't realize this clip was this long, and I don't feel like trimming it down. Boop. These are my dogs. They deserve a little snoop boop. Boop. I turned the frame around so that I could cut off those little tabs on either side so that it actually meets flush with the uppy downy parts of the frame. Then I had to turn it back around, and I included that part of the video because this was the wrong way of doing that, and it hurt me a lot. Don't do this. This video actually has a lot of examples of things that you shouldn't do. I'll show you more later. The next day it was raining, which makes working with wood and adhesive not fun. So I spent a good 20 minutes taking a tarp and trying to run it across a bunch of different parts of my yard. It ended up working out pretty good. I'm terrible at backing up my truck, so this took me a lot longer than I expected. But eventually I got it to the point that I wanted it to, and I was able to start working on stuff again, which is good because I was getting super impatient. Here I started cutting the, I don't know, little butt parts that attach to the back of the frame and meet with where the truck open part. Truck bed, open bed. I don't know, man. I'm tired. It's late. Tailgate, that's the word. I measured out the locations where the tailgate connector parts would touch on the little butt piece that I was making. Man, I gotta learn words. And I used a jigsaw and some holes to cut out those little chunks so that it would fit. I tried to get this piece more accurate, but stuff broke off. Next, I cut the little angle piece onto the butt part that's gonna hold more of the wood. Did a little test fit, and it fit this try, which is not the first try. I went and cut out another one, and then I cut out this piece of wood, which I didn't record any of that, and I don't remember how I measured it, but I measured it with measuring tools. Getting this mounted up to glue together was terrible, but after it was glued up and put together, it fit into the truck on the first try. I tried laying down a tarp so that I could keep glue off of my bed, but this was a mistake and just ended up making things slip. To actually secure this back to the frame that I put together, I ended up drilling holes on this top piece. If I do this again, I would have just made this so that that entire bottom runner piece was one piece, and then that little butt portion just fit directly to it, but this worked too. Here I started sizing up where the Kydex panels were going to go. They're just scrap. I pre-drilled a couple different holes, and then I threw them up and just ran screws into them to hold them in place until I could drill additional holes. I put some adhesive on as well, hoping that would help insulate it. That was what the plastic was for, and it sucked. Putting these in wasn't as bad as I'd expected. Once I got like one screw in a good spot, it didn't really move much, and I could put the rest of them in. As you can see, there's tons of warping, so this is not optimal. Here's where parts of the build started to go poorly. I pulled the camper out of the truck, which I realized very quickly how poorly I designed this. There should have been some type of runner across the top for me to bear weight on as I was trying to move this thing, and it just has the foam frame. If you are thinking about doing this, just don't do this. I did a terrible job on the poor man's fiberglass. Like you can see from pretty much every portion of this, I should have wet down the glue. I should have coated, sanded, and scratched up the sides of this before I started applying the glue to it. I should have used some type of pipe or 2x4 to actually roll this across the top of it and keep it from wrinkling. I shouldn't have used the material that I used in the first place. It was just stuff that I got from a thrift store. But it went about as well as I could have hoped. The top adhered pretty well. Rolling the paint, the glue onto it seemed like it was okay. Most of the portions felt pretty good as I was doing it. It felt like it was getting saturated really well. But it wasn't. Don't do that. Tried to compensate by cutting and stapling, and it just didn't work. So, what did we learn? Well, my main takeaway at this point is don't use random fabric that you get at the store. It ended up costing me more money and worked significantly worse, so it cost me more money in just everything. I actually had to cut off chunks of it because I didn't want it building up water. Because I knew that it was going to end up building water. But I just painted it anyways. I used an acrylic-based paint and I just slathered it on. It looked pretty awful. It was just gray. It was the cheapest one I could find. But as far as I could tell, it kept water out. Doesn't seem like it's scratching off or peeling. I made sure to go heavy on all the different corners and spots that I thought might end up building up a lot of water and have the potential for rotting. It went on a lot easier on the underside portion over here. I don't know if it just went on. Here I started working out what the back door was going to look like. I just took chunks of wood and measured and traced it against the back profile of the little camper. Then I took it over to the saw and I ripped off the little chunks that I'd set up. Once I had the profile for one, I just replicated it on the other one, which actually ended up not working out that well because apparently this whole thing is crooked. Next, I put the whole thing together with a bunch of pocket screws. I just drilled the holes using a vise, and then I smacked them together with. I actually usually don't end up using like real pocket screws. I just used whatever I have with a long drill bit. It seemed to work pretty well. I've had a couple of boards split, but I'm sure that that's not the screw's fault. It's probably my fault. I also used glue. Look, there's glue. Yay. And here's a nice shot of my workbench and not of what I'm working on. Once I had the door together, rather than doing poor man's fiberglass, since I did such a terrible job on the previous one, I just coated the entire thing in acrylic paint. I did like 3 or 4 coats. I don't know if it'll actually hold up to weathering over the course of more than one trip, but it worked for the few that I've been on. For the hinges, I just used regular door hinges. This part of the build was probably my favorite. I just ordered a backup cam off of the internet along with the Tacoma mounting connector thing. I went online and found some schematics and actually modeled a piece that was angled for the back of this. When I 3D printed it, it fit on like I think the second try, which is great for somebody who's really not super mechanically inclined. I spent a pretty good amount of time trying to figure out what the actual wiring for it is. The connection for the 3rd gen Tacomas is a little bit different, so I just took what I found and matched it up with the wiring harness that I ordered online. I'll have both linked in the description. It took a couple of minutes, soldered it. I actually soldered it wrong like 5 or 6 times. I went back and forth just resoldering, connecting, unconnecting, and reconnecting. The original wire that came with the camera also was a bit long and didn't end up working the way that it was supposed to. Once I got it down and made the connection though, popping it on was just, this is the best. Heck yeah. Once everything was connected and working properly, I went and put the little wire heat shrink wraps on them and heated those up. Next I cut some glass, plexiglass for the back window. I threw tape on it to hopefully prevent it from cracking. It worked great, but then when I attached it to the actual door, I ended up just screwing directly through it, so all the work that I did trying to prevent it from cracking with the jigsaw ended up just cracking from too much pressure from the drill points. But I pre-drilled the holes. I threw butyl tape on it to hopefully prevent any leaking inside of it. This is not an optimal way of putting this together. There's a lot of better ways that you can put a window together, but I wanted this to be done. I had camping to be had. But at this point, the build was pretty much complete. I cut some steel to use with toggle clamps. I attached it to a 3D printed bed rail mount that I found online, which I'll link as well as the other 3D prints that I made. When I put it in the back of the bed, I also used 2 regular just vice clamps on the back to secure to the frame. That was like probably the most secure portion of it. But it's done. It worked about as well as anyone could have expected. It looks kind of rough, but it keeps water out. I took it camping with some of my buddies, and it was nice being able to just get in the back of my truck and sleep. It was not particularly comfortable. There's absolutely 0 insulation, so the temperature actually dropped down below like 30 degrees at one point, and me and Chicken Nugget were sitting in the back just shaking. We ended up getting out, and the first night we ended up sleeping in the back of the truck rather than in the actual camper that we put together. But it looks kind of cool. We set up some fun spots and hung out. But I think there's a lot of room for me to improve on it. And I actually ended up spending some time working on something else already. I ordered an Amazon camper because I was just, I wanted to camp, and I was sick of not being able to go out and do stuff. And this one works. I actually ended up welding a bed frame for the truck out of scrap steel, and it's there. But, you know, I haven't decided if I'm going to pick back up on that project. I think I'm going to continue on this rail project, and if nothing else, I'm going to put out another video for this one. Thanks for watching. Sorry for the audio on the last one, but, you know.